We need to, as organizations, craft a good employee experience so when they are onboarding, we don't lose them. We don't lose them, they go to lunch. We don't lose them when they leave for the weekend and get ghosted right after you spend all this time training them. So I think that employee experience is really going to be the number one thing that organizations need to be focusing on in 2024.
Hello, today I am so pleased to introduce Justine A. Carroll, a managing consultant with LandrumHR. Justine designs customized and holistic solutions for LandrumHR clients so they can be more efficient, compliant, and successful. I'm excited to have her here today so she can share her thoughts on how to navigate the generational differences that are disrupting workplaces. Welcome, Justine. This is such an interesting topic that with the various generations. We've been talking a lot on my podcast and articles about AI and disruption, but I think there's a lot of generational disruption too. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that right from the start.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here, Cynthia. I think this is a really exciting time to be navigating the workplace right now because we have so many different generations in the workplace. It really does lend itself to these added technologies that we're really starting to see with AI. And a lot of organizations, I think that everybody sort of sees AI as, robots, right? They've definitely seen a lot of science fiction movies, but I think it's really going to, when used properly, I think it's really going to help both employees have a greater employee experience. And I think it's also going to help the HR leaders in their organizations to create efficiencies and find better ways to, use their time more wisely so they can spend more time with the employees.
So I'm curious on your thoughts. My background is also HR. So, we're speaking my language here, but I'm curious on your thoughts as to if you think that AI, as an example, will bring generations more close together or make that divide larger.
I think with all technologies that are out there, that there are the early adopters, right? And they think that every new technology that comes out there is the new golden ticket. And that's the thing that's going to fix everything. And it's a shortcut. It's a tool that it doesn't really help them create these interpersonal relationships. We saw the same thing with other technologies when they came into the workplace. People started getting Zoom burnout. When messaging IM first came out, you saw a lot of people not, understanding how to use it properly. So I think with any sort of technology that comes into the workplace, it comes down to education. It comes down to using it appropriately, to use it in a positive manner. Any technology can actually be used to drive a generation apart, right? If you have a single focus on one particular kind of integrative technology, the older generations really focus in on emails, right? They like the formality of it. They like how they can give a lot of information all at once. Whereas we're finding that as people, grow on and sort of pursue in their careers, they don't need all those long emails. No one's reading those emails anymore. So you saw the rise of IMs. Well, that led a very casual sort of way of people were communicating that certain generations were not comfortable with. So I think there's a lot of examples out there. You're seeing it now with the rise of TikTok and Snapchat that, organizations are trying to utilize these newer technologies, and if not integrated properly and not used correctly, could drive people apart. But I think that there's a lot that can be said to use it to better integrate those generations.
When you were speaking, it reminded me of a thing I saw. It was a clip from a comedian, and she was talking about the long emails, and she sent a long text to her child, I guess. She's in her 40s, so she's got a teenage child, and she sends this text to the child, and she responds back with TLDR. And she goes, "What is TLDR?" She goes, "Too long, didn't read." I thought that is so funny. And I think that speaks to what you just said. Yeah.
I think it's true. And I think that, technology can really be a bridge between the different generations in our workplaces, but you have to make sure that it's dispersed and you're not just using a single type of communication style. The younger generations that are coming in are huge fans of TikTok. A lot of older generations don't know what it is. They are resistant to it, but it's been a good tool for a lot of the younger generations to learn about certain things they need to know about in the corporate culture. They don't know a lot of these acronyms. They don't know a lot of things that, in some of the older generations, we just take for granted, So I think there are some skills there on both sides that, technology can bridge a little bit. But it is funny because some of those, when I get those texts from my kids too, they send me, abbreviations and I'm thinking, what does this one stand for? So
Yeah, then you're sneaking off to Google it to see what it means, right? So you don't tell your kids nothing. So human
exactly.
resources wasn't initially on your radar during your undergrad years. So can you share more about the specific moments that led you to discover your passion for HR?
Yeah, absolutely. As I had mentioned before, I was getting my degree in psychology, and my plan was to eventually practice either as therapist or as school psychologist or something along those lines. And I ended up taking some classes that were a little bit more business oriented, and I was like, this is kind of interesting. And I started seeing sort of some overlap between how you can integrate into a business environment and use some of these skills that I was learning in psychology. And I found human resources I didn't even know it existed. And I found that it was sort of that bridge between those two things that I was really passionate about, learning about business as, from an essentials perspective. And then also, that sort of care and understanding of individuals and helping them find their best selves. And I found that human resources was sort of that bridge. So I, like many people, started out in recruiting, which was really exciting because you really get a lot of people interaction and you learn how people think and people are at their most vulnerable, right? They're looking for a job or they may have been just fired or they're going into a new career. And so I really enjoyed recruiting. I thought it was great. And I just wanted to keep growing and learning. And so I just sort of committed myself all into that career track. And it's been great. I've really enjoyed how those two things have come together. And I highly recommend, it's a lot of people when they go into college and they're looking for a degree, or they're not sure what to do with, certain degrees. Human resources is a great career that has a lot of different options related to it that I didn't even know about. I wish I had. I tell my kids now, I'm like, this is always a career path for you.
I agree completely. When my undergrad was in education and psychology, and the very first human resources position that I got, I had gone in, I was divorced, I was a single mom looking for a job, like freaking out. And I went in and I interviewed to be a high-level executive assistant, just, hold me over, just until I get on my feet and things get going well. And the CEO at the time, he looked at me and said, "You're not an executive assistant. I think I want you in HR." So he hired me like on the spot as his director, like director level of HR. It was a startup. And I was there my second week and he said, "Okay, we're going to do an acquisition in Birmingham, Alabama. And I want you to go and I want you to I want you to do due diligence and tell me the cost per butt." And I said, absolutely. I had no idea what he was talking about. So one of the things that I really respect about HR as a career is you can learn a lot on the job. You can grow on the job. And the more passionate you are about what you're doing, the more you can learn. And that is true with like generationally too, because I had to go to people that were older than me that had been doing HR for a long time. I had to start studying for my SPHR exam and, all the things. I went back and got my master's degree eventually, but all of it started because someone took a chance on me. And I believe that the generation before me was willing to help me, was willing to show me. And I think that that's important for all of us to remember that generations can help one another.
I 100% agree. When I typically create mentorship programs in organizations that I'm working with, that is usually my primary message is that, mentorship is not just top down. I think that it's more of sort of a spider web, right? Everybody has skills that they can share, experiences that they have brought up from their career path, wherever it had taken them. And I think it's a mistake these days to think that, you can only climb the corporate ladder up. I think that it's really more of, like I said, a spider web of sharing information and knowledge. And I feel that a lot of the younger generations are very receptive to that, type of give and take. They want to learn from the individuals who have more experience, sometimes in the older demographic, certainly, but they also are willing to learn from their peers. They also are looking and thirsting for knowledge, and they want to get back into the offices. It's funny, there's a lot of correlation between the Gen Z and the boomers. They both like to be in the office, and the correlation is that they like to be around other people. They like to learn from other people. So you're seeing a lot of that mentorship happening organically between those two generations, which I think is fascinating, because you wouldn't think that they would be a group that would mesh together. You have a certain stereotype of Gen Z, they don't want to work, or they don't, try hard enough, or they want things handed to them. And we're really finding in the actual numbers that they want to be in the office. They want to learn. They want opportunities. They want to be challenged. And, it's really a great opportunity for, the boomer generation, the Gen Jones generation, to share a knowledge with them that they've, brought up and learned. So it's a really interesting correlation that we're seeing in the workplace between those two particular generations.
So I'm curious, and some of our listeners may not be completely aware of where each generation kind of the break off is. So do you have any clarity that you could share on that?
Well, I don't have the numbers specifically in front of me about date to date, but when you talk about the generation that you're seeing less and less of, only 3% of them are now in the workplace now, is the silent generation, right? So these are the over 60, definitely into their retirement years. Sometimes you will find some of the silent generation in some of the pockets in some older management roles, and they're shifting out. So they were the pre-post-war generation. So we're not seeing as much of them as we are. The boomers are the next older generation. There's a subset of them, which is the Gen Jones. Those folks are typically in their could be retiring years. So in those mid 60s, early 60s, and they're not retiring. They're enjoying working. They're really getting a lot of interaction. The Gen Jones, they're the younger end of the boomers. So they are certainly enjoying staying in the workplace. They have capital to spend. They're enjoying their jobs, but they're sort of creating this bottleneck for the Gen Xers who are, coming up. They are in their mid 50s. They were the 80s kids, and they are trying to get to those C-suite level positions, and those middle management positions are blocked. They can't get there because the Gen Joneses and the boomers are staying in the workforce longer than they were, or they're returning to the workforce and taking some of those roles. After, the 80s kids, the Gen X kids, you've got the millennials. They took a lot of heat for a long time in the workplace, and they came in during the recession. So they had the hardest time. When you think about, they're in their mid 30s, mid 40s now, and they are really struggling to sort of realize some of these financial gains that they should be in, because they got hit with the recession. And then they also are, again, we're seeing this blockade of people moving up because no one's moving out. And so you're seeing sort of this block there between the millennials, the Gen Yers, sometimes they're called extennials, depending on, again, where they are in the age group. And then you have the Gen X and the Gen Y who are just now coming into the workforce. The Gen X, or I think the Gen Z, I guess I should say, are just coming out of high school. They're going into college. They've got, some of them may not be going in college and they're going into careers, so they are really, the Gen Z group and the Gen Y group, they are really changing. They're changing how employers are interacting with their employees in a lot of ways that we have not seen since the rise of unions. So it's really very interesting. A lot of it came out of COVID. A lot of people wanted a different work-life balance. And it's funny because the millennials had been saying all along, right? Why can't we work from home? We can do these things from home. And no one listened. No one believed them. And so now we're having these two younger generations come up, and definitely because of COVID had definitely pushed that in. So when you look at the stagger, they definitely are about 20 years apiece, when you think about age groups. But there's no hard and fast rule about this year means this year means that, because people have had different experiences, right? There's been different economic challenges that have come up. There may be, the way their parents raised them are a little bit different. So there's no hard and fast rule to, you're only in this generation. There's a lot of overlap on either end for most of these generations, which is why I think it's important for organizations to focus on the employee experience rather than the age group and getting lost in those stereotypes.
In addition to just generationally, another area that I've seen drastic differences is geographic. Early in my consulting business, I was working for an organization that was based here in Pittsburgh, and they were acquired by a company in San Francisco. So the San Francisco team sent in a lot of talented people here to Pittsburgh to work. And the leadership in Pittsburgh was like, they looked at these people as though they were from Mars, because they were willing to walk out the door at 4:00, period, whether work is done or work is not done. And this Pittsburgh work ethic mindset, like you have to be at your desk, you have to be at your desk from, and the first person who puts their coat on is really the loser because they're not really committed to their role. And it was really interesting to watch these two cultures. And there wasn't one of these people that came in from San Francisco. They were all really highly paid individuals. And there wasn't one of them who wouldn't just, in a snap of a finger, turn around and walk out of the job. Like, just say, bye, I don't need this. And that was a totally different mindset. And I know it's not necessarily all generational, because here it was more regional, like the mindset to another. But I'm sure that those same things play into the generational changes.
Oh, absolutely. The generations, as I said, you're seeing a big shift in how they're interacting with employers. But I think you bring up a good point. Region is also a factor in that, but so is industry. So depending on the industry that you're in, you're going to, a certain type of personality characteristic tends to gravitate to certain roles sometimes. And you'll get a lot of that, last one to leave is the winner in architecture. It's all about clocking the right hours. Finance is another one that has that sort of grinded out mentality. So what I'm seeing in the market these days is that I'm seeing two things. One, I'm seeing a greater number of people choosing an industry based on how they like to work. So that sort of mindset of get up, grind it out, work 80 hours a week kind of thing. You see that, I'm seeing that more as a personality characteristics and people gravitating towards certain industries more than I'm seeing it as a generational circumstance. Because I think that, every generation sees work a little bit differently. I know Generation X is, the Gen Xers always sort of had this we never had the live to work. It was, you did what you needed to do to get the money and your focus was on life balance. And you see that a lot in my particular generation in the types of flexibility they're looking for with their hours, the work-life balance that's always been a focus for them. But you're seeing some of that change. The boomers were very focused on job only. You do a good job. You don't ask for help. You don't ask for additional perks and things of that nature. So I think the different generations have certainly specific perspectives on work, but I do find that I'm seeing a greater rise in how people are picking what they want to do now. And as they sort of have this new self-awareness of what they like to do, what they're willing to do, this sort of what you referred to as I'm going to walk out of a job if I want to. I think they're being more careful about the kind of company that they work for. And that is a, younger generational perspective. They want to know, does this company care about their people? They do more research about how do they actually treat their people. Glassdoor had a huge rise in traffic because these younger generations want to know what it's really like to work there before they start working there. That's why you see them sometimes take these jobs, suss it out, see if it's what they said it was going to be, and they'll hit the door because it's not what they said. The company does not walk the walk. They'll tell you in the interview that they do X, Y, and Z. They get in the door, they find out that's not true. And they are really looking for a match between what the company says they're going to do and what they actually do. And I find that that really permeates through, a lot of how they're choosing their jobs. They're looking for truth, they're looking for, does this company have a vision that's real, or is it all just talk? So I think it's interesting how individuals are now choosing careers, companies, jobs.
I think that that's very valid. One of the things that I've learned as an executive coach, I've been coaching for 14 years now, and I have learned that a lot of these executives that get into the C-suite and they're happy and things are going well. Well, I say they're happy. They're in the role that they wanted to be in, but they get to a point, and what I found is a lot of them would get to a point and say, "I can't do this anymore. Like, I just don't love what I'm doing." And yet they have no idea what they want to do instead. So originally, as a coach, as an executive coach, I would start to help the executive. And I'd say, well, let's look at your resume and let's see what skills we can transfer, how can we make this a transition that's going to be successful? So I helped people for a couple of years doing that were already my executive clients. And then they got to a new role, and a year later, they're like, "Cindy, I'm still not happy here. Like, I'm still not doing the same thing." What I realized through trial and error with working with executives is that there was a key piece that I was doing what pretty much any career coach would do, and that was go through those steps. The piece that I realized was missing is identifying the fact that the person you are today that hates this job that you're in, it hates it because you're no longer the same person you were 20 years ago when you chose this career. Unless you take the time to do the reflection and figure out where you've grown and who you are and the kind of company you want to work for, you're not going to be happy in your next role. And that is what led me to create my program for career transition: Reflect, Rebuild, Rebrand. And we call it Re3 because that's long. But that program is designed because of exactly what you're saying. This younger generation is figuring it out earlier. Our generation, they're like into these careers 20, 25 years going, yeah, maybe not. Maybe accounting wasn't the right choice or isn't today.
I 100% agree with you. I think that there is a lot of self-reflection going on in a lot of the older demographic. And that's why you're seeing, especially with the COVID response, how people use that as an opportunity to jump into a new career. For whatever reason, they either had the time because of COVID or they were laid off because of COVID. They had a major career interruption of some kind. And they used that opportunity to find out what they did want to do and sort of start that new path as far as where they were going now. And some of them now have the financial flexibility to do that, right? Because they didn't, when they originally were looking for a career, they were looking for something they could build and make money and support a family. Well, now a lot of those children are grown. A lot of those children don't have those same financial needs. They may be on the cusp of retiring, and instead of retiring, they're going into second careers. And I think it's really interesting because I love the idea of that personal growth, right? Because I think if you are going into a second career and it's a career that you actually love, you're going to be intrinsically happier. The people around you are going to be happier, and you may stay in the workforce and share that knowledge and experience with other individuals that figured it out, like you said, a lot earlier. So I think there's a lot of movement going on in the market with generations and because of COVID. So I know that everyone really struggled through some of the challenges that COVID presented, but I'm of the mind that we really got a lot of positivity out of it because companies started looking at their employees differently again. There were new opportunities. People started reevaluating where they wanted to go. So I think it's been sort of a reboot in many ways that I hope some of the good lessons that we've taken away from COVID stick with us as an organization.
What do you think for people that were just getting into the workforce when COVID hit? Okay, we had the shutdown. Like I think about this a lot because onboarding is important. The people's first 90 days or 120 days in a role, it makes a big difference of how they're onboarded. So people that were coming into the workforce during COVID, during the shutdown, especially young generation, like their first time in the workforce, What kind of impact do you think that's going to have long term?
I think that they are the ones that are having the hardest time. When you look at mental health statistics, that group is the loneliest, right? Especially if they took a job somewhere new and this shutdown happened. Most of us use work as your first social stepping stone into a new area, right? And they didn't have that opportunity because they were in their houses, in their offices at home, as opposed to having those opportunities to grab a coffee, get some lunch, get to know their cube mate, things of that nature. So I do think that I think it's been difficult for that group more than anyone else. I think a lot of groups thrived, right? I think that the Generation X, the millennials, they were in heaven. They never want to go back to the office. But I think the younger generation, they're missing out on some of the skills that I think are going to help their career because they're not getting that one-on-one interaction that maybe they would have in an office environment. So I think there's going to be a little bit more of slow growth in terms of long-term repercussions for that. I think that, some of the skills that you learn being with people in meetings, how to lead a meeting, how not to lead a meeting. When you're in a meeting on location, people see you. It's just, you can't be like working on something else in a meeting. People see what you're doing. And I think they forget that. They forget how to, or they were never taught how to appropriately start a meeting, right? How are we all doing? What's going on here? They just jump right into it. And it's, for a lot of other individuals who didn't, who had different experiences in the workforce, it's very jarring for them, right? They just sort of jump right into the meeting and everyone's like, whoa, how about a little pleasantries first? It's a skill. It's sort of office manners, office etiquette. Those things are soft skills that you learn by doing. And I think that that's been an area for them of growth and development that I think that you're starting to see. I'd mentioned TikTok earlier. That generation relies very heavily on TikTok for ways to, figure out, acronyms, how to start a meeting, what they're supposed to do in meetings, and I Google what to wear, and do searches on that. So it's really interesting. They're trying to find the resources to know these things because they're behind. They're not getting that one-on-one mentorship that comes from just being around people. Certainly you're on Zoom and you're around them, but it's just not quite the same. I know when I was very junior in my career, I worked around other people in HR that were in varied levels of experience and just interacting with them in meetings, seeing how they did things, listening to them talk about employee issues. I learned a lot by doing that. They're not getting that opportunity. So I do have concerns. I think it's going to be a little bit of a slower growth trajectory for them because of that. But I have every confidence that they're going to be able to get there because they have some other skills that I think they're already off the charts on. So I think, it's again, I think we need to, as organizations, craft a good employee experience. So when they are onboarding, we don't lose them. We don't lose them. They go to lunch. We don't lose them when they leave for the weekend, and get ghosted right after you spend all this time training them. So I think that employee experience is really going to be the number one thing that organizations need to be focusing on in 2024.
One of the things that my company, we always do when we're working with organizations is we teach them and we do everything that we do. We start with connection before content. So you were kind of alluding to that in your meetings. It's not don't just jump into the content. Let's build some connection. My question for you is, generation to generation, what are some of the ways you encourage people? We have our ways that we use between generations to help them connect at the beginning of a meeting or a beginning of a workshop or something. What are some ways intergenerationally, not just in general connection, but intergenerationally that you have?
I think usually where I start is trying to assess what kind of industry we're dealing with, right? Because different industries interact very differently. An advertising agency is going to act very differently than a bank or a credit union. So really kind of knowing what you're working with first, because I have a lot of different types of clients and a lot of different, they're different sizes and they're in different industries. I think knowing who and what you're talking about first and foremost really needs to help guide you first and foremost when you're trying to make that connection. I think when you are dealing with the generations, it's important to really focus on the style of communication. Because if you are using references that don't appeal to a large group, you've already alienated part of your listening group, right? And I think it's the language, it's the references, it's, certain groups hate those icebreakers, right? Like the tell me something about yourself, the standard when you trot those out. A lot of generations despise that. They don't want to tell a story where they were embarrassed or, they want to share a secret about themselves with people that they're working with. And I think it's important to sort of understand, that different generations are going to have a different perspective, and focusing on the communication styles and communication differences, and that's language, that's tone, that's medium, all the things we've been sort of talking about here. I think that's the focus whenever I go into a situation like that where I have a client and they're like, I don't know how to reach my people. I break it down into, well, let's try to figure out what we're trying to do. Who are we trying to talk to? What does your demographic look like? And tell me what you have been doing, because 9 times out of 10, it is a communication issue. Either the way they're doing it, the manner in which they're doing it, the references that they're utilizing. You have to be careful at those, upper echelon when you have, these town hall meetings, this top down sort of, look what you could do for the company perspective doesn't play as well with some of the younger generation. They want to know, sort of the inverse of Maslow's hierarchy, to say, they want to know how it affects them. And I think just assuming that they want to help build the business for the C-suite is a mistake. So they need to craft their language in a way to make sure that they're not being tone deaf to these generations and what they're looking for, because that's the fastest way to lose people. So for me, it's all about communication.
I agree. I've watched organizations, especially like with a lot of the things that have happened over the, with pride and Black Lives Matter and all the different things that come up socially that the younger generation is very engrossed in and interested in. And sometimes you get senior management's like, nah, we just want to keep a low profile. We don't want to have an opinion. And that really goes against the grain of who they are. And one of the things that we always try to encourage is core values. So if you're working for an organization who wants to keep silent on something that is one of your core values, you're not going to stay, especially that generation. An older generation might say, well, I can get my core values honored at home. That's changing. It's changing very much. They want the organization to be in alignment with what they value.
I would agree 100%. It goes back to how they are choosing the places that they're working. They want to know what that looks like before they get in there, because if there's not a correlation between what they're saying and what they're actually doing, once they're in that organization, they will leave because they are not seeing those same mission and overall philosophies echoed, and so they don't want to be part of an organization that they don't believe in. And it sounds kind of funny, right? Because people are like, for a long time, it's just a job. I'm just working for a company and it's got good benefits and I don't really care what their perspective is. You're seeing less and less of that, and shifting to more of if I'm going to work for this organization and I'm going to give them a lot of my time, I want to make sure that they're investing in and doing things that I believe in. You see a lot of that online right now, especially with the younger generations of, what does this organization stand for? Because if I don't like them, I'm not even going to shop there. So being a part of an organization has become just another part of that condition of employment for them.
It's almost with the demand for good talent that we have today. It's almost as though job sites are really similar to dating sites. It's, let's all put our best foot forward and put it all out there of who we are and what we believe in. And we like pina coladas because that's how they're choosing. They have the choice. They have the ability to go wherever. So you better sell your profile pretty well.
I would agree with that. I think it's interesting because in the, I would say late 80s, well, really more of the early to mid 90s and mid 90s, you saw a lot of organizations, especially during the tech boom, of, really pushing. This is what it's like to work here. Look, we're fun. We have a ping pong table and we have coffee and, all of these things. And we're finding that that's a very antiquated thought process now. That's not going to get them to stay. They don't care you have coffee on site and you have a ping pong table. They want to know, what your response was to this particular circumstance in the society. So yeah, it's really becoming a really important piece to attracting and retaining talent. People will not stay. And especially you get really there's not this three strikes you're out situation. They will leave much sooner than you would anticipate if, again, if you're not walking the walk, they're gone.
I think whatever you believe politically, I do believe that organizations that are in states that have really strict rules on one thing or women's health or another are going to have a hard time retaining people because there are women, there are families that will not go to that state. So organizations are going to have a challenge, and no matter what the issue is, it's just that's the one that came to my mind. But there's always issues, and you're right. The generations right now believe passionately in their issues, and they will make their career choices for themselves and their families based on those.
Well, and Gen Z is, as they come up into the workforce, I mean, they are one of the most educated and well-informed, you could almost say overeducated generations that we've had so far. So they are very involved and informed about what's going on. So you can't fake it as an organization. And so, because they'll see through that. I agree with you regionally, especially in Florida. I have a lot of clients in Florida that have been negatively impacted by some of the immigration policies and practices that are in that state because they cannot find people to work there. And it's not necessarily because they are looking to employ individuals who aren't eligible to work. It's just people won't go there because they are nervous about what else is going to go on the books. And I can't move my family there. It's too volatile. So I have a lot of clients down there that are really struggling trying to find, labor at all levels because people don't want to work or live in Florida. So they've had to expand out to try and get people to come to Florida. And it's been a real challenge. So I think, again, it's partially the organization needs to make sure that their messaging is on point, but they also are experiencing some of those challenges as well.
I think it's interesting, this conversation and the series started off being about generational differences. But as we're speaking, I think there's an opening for an entirely different series for Authority Magazine on what the politics is doing with finding workers. Good, bad, and different. It's making a difference, I think, today more than ever before.
I would agree with you. And I think this goes into how the younger generation, I'm seeing a correlation between how they are changing the workforce as they're coming up into it for the better in some circumstances, but also just changing the scope of what that interaction now looks like. It used to be a very don't ask, don't tell. I don't want to know anything about your private life. And that was the line, especially from HR, right? We don't want to know too much about your life. It's too dangerous, and that has really started to shift. And some of it, I think, is due to the way that Gen Z wants to interact with employers, some of the changes that they're demanding in terms of pay transparency and things of that nature. You're seeing a real shift in the market on how employers are having to sort of recalibrate some of these age-old processes and manners that they used to interact with their employees that just don't work anymore.
Right. Absolutely. And everything's changed. Even my son's in his 30s and he is gay. And he said, he and I talk about that, but he has a half sibling from his father's side. And that generation's about 10 years younger than him. And he said, Mom, their generation, gender's not even an issue. It's not an issue. We don't talk about it. It's just people are people. And, my son's generation was a little more open than, say, my generation or my husband's generation. And fortunately, those are changing for the better. But I think that as you're exactly right that as the younger people are coming into the workplace, they are demanding how we're going to work and how we're going to be treated, how we're going to be identified, how we're going to be spoken to. And I think that's good.
I think, like I said, I think that we've learned a lot of lessons in the last, I would say, 3 to 4 years that I think are very positive. I think that every generation is bringing something interesting and different to the workforce. And that's what I like about having 5 generations in the workforce these days. Everybody has something different to contribute. And having an employer that is recognizing that and celebrating how those differences can help them be a better department, better organization, they're the ones who are really going to thrive. And I think, long gone are the days where you're trying to make everybody the same and make everybody a clone. I think that you're really looking for building a community in your workforce that is diverse and not just, diverse. People always think, oh, color, but I mean, diverse in a lot of different ways, the demographic, different viewpoints, and I think that there's room for that now. There's room for that discussion. But as an employer, you have to be involved in it. You have to manage it because too much of it and it will derail productivity and be disruptive. Too little of it and you've got people not engaging and cooperating. So it's a fine line that it's nothing that you can autopilot. It absolutely takes engagement from the executive team, from the C-suite. It's a thought process. And I think that, some of the executive leadership teams are a little scared to get involved in it. I think it's an unknown for them.
Right. I know that I found that with some of the executive teams that I've worked with. It's just like, can we just not talk about that right now? We'll do it later. But what our conversation has spelled out the need for organizations like yours and for what you do. So as listeners are listening, what would you like them to know about what you do and how to reach out to you?
One of the things that I really love about working with a PEO is that it really provides growth opportunity for these small to medium-sized businesses. Most of the businesses that I work with are looking for that way to take their business or their organization to the next level. They want to grow, or they just, they want to expand their, benefit offering. They want to create some efficiencies, and those are those infrastructure things that usually come after the passionate drive and the passionate building time, right? You start a business, you're excited and it's booming and everything, and all these things are going on. And as a business owner, you feel like you can't take your eye off the ball, right? You're trying to do all these things, but you have limited resources. And that's what I really like about working in a PEO is that for me personally, every business is different. And I love that we do not try to put everybody in the same box. Our goal here is to what can we do to make you more successful? What tools do we have that are going to help you grow in terms of benefit offerings, efficiencies with payroll? Getting your own HRIS system can be really expensive for a small to medium-sized business. Workers' comp rates, all these things feed into all those costs. You need partners. And I think that oftentimes people get a little bit scared. They hear PEO and they're like, I've lost control of my business. And that's not what it is. We are here to make your business easier, so they can focus on building it, and they can sort of take their eye off some of these infrastructure things that we can help them build and we already have in place so they can utilize, access, and benefit from. So operationally, benefits, payroll, better, programs, things of that nature, and there's a huge growth pocket there for small and medium-sized businesses. So I love working there. I love the diversity in terms of different industries and sizes. And I love going to work knowing that something's going to happen. I don't know what it's going to happen every day. So I enjoy that. But I do think that Landrum has a very particular perspective on how we partner and create value with our clients. We are not looking to put everybody in the same box. It's a far more boutique, specialized type of organization that I think a lot of our clients really benefit from.
That's a great way to leave things. And how would you like people to reach out to you? All of your links will be in the show notes as well as in your article, but sometimes we have a favorite way for people to reach out. Where would you prefer they reach out to you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. They can find me under Landrum is also on LinkedIn. We've got a lot of different, I Email is always my best thing, just because then I can make sure that I'm getting the right people involved in the conversation. I'm not really on the salesy side. I mean, I think we're all a little bit of a salesperson, but I do think that, we have a great internal team that really can and connect with individuals and see what they need, see what we can do to help them for sure.
Excellent. I'm going to ask you one more question. If you could leave our listeners with one piece of advice for navigating the complexities of those generational differences in the workplace, what would it be?
Just one?
Just one.
Gosh,
So I waited to last.
You know what? I think that it's all about listening and starting the conversation. I think it's not something that's going to go away. And I think that if you really want to grow your own business and protect it and watch some of this organic changes that are happening as we get these newer generations coming in, you got to start the conversation. You got to be listening to what your people are wanting, because this transparency of what, employees are looking for and everything else, it's not going to go away. And listening is going to be one of those top skill sets that I think all leaders need to be focusing on in terms of trying to find what it is that their people are going to want in order to attract them, retain them, all of those things. Now, when I say listen, I do not mean be held hostage, so I think that there is a difference there, but I do think that it's starting that conversation, and starting to listen and not be afraid of it, because it's going to happen. You might as well start, being part of that narrative as opposed to it happening to you, and trying to fix something is going to be a lot harder.
Well, that's excellent. And I thank you so much for your time and your insight today. It was enjoyable talking to you. To our listeners, I hope you found value in this episode of Care to Lead. And until next time, remember that leaders who care to lead. Subscribe to the podcast for more conversations with today's top leaders. And again, I thank you so much, Justine.
Thanks for having me, Cynthia. It was great.